the difference between functional medicine and mainstream medicine is that we are root cause medicine. So if you come to me and you say, I have a headache, I want to know why you have that headache, right? Is it hormone imbalances? Is it stress related? Are you hydrated? What's your diet like? How is your sleep? Like all of those things. So it's all encompassing, it's holistic. Whereas you go to a physician in Canada, you say, I have a headache. He'll say, here's some Advil or here's some whatever, pain medicine. And so it's it's hard to say. I mean, it's like I said, I think it's really a systemic issue in terms of how our physicians are trained and, down the line, the sponsorship and all of that. But so we in functional medicine really like to look at the whole person. So we also, mainstream medicine, they like to compartmentalize people, right? So, you have an issue with your head, you go see a neurologist, or you have an issue with your stomach, you go see a gastroenterologist,
Yeah.
right? Whereas in the medicine that I work with, we believe and understand that the entire body is connected, right? And so we just look at you holistically.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Dialogue Over Division. And I'm really excited to have with me Shauna Gourley. Shauna is a functional medicine doctor, and I think these things are so important. I've recently been saying if we want to hold our government to account, we have to also hold ourselves to account. So I think physical health is such an important part of keeping our democracy strong. So I'm really excited to hear about your story, your journey, and maybe let's start with that. How did you get into this functional medicine stuff, and what is that all about?
Right. Well, that's a bit of a story in and of itself. So my journey started back in, well, after I had my last daughter. I had my kids a little bit late. So at 37 and 39, I lived a lot of life before I had my babies. And so, but after I had my second child, I just really felt like I didn't recover fully. And, I knew that it was sort of intuitively hormone related. And I had a good GP at the time, but that's just sort of not their wheelhouse, right? But she sent
Yeah.
me around to all of the different practitioners in the standard allopathic system. And unfortunately, the answer there was always, well, we can't really see anything wrong. Here's some antidepressant medication. And finally, I ended up at an OBGYN because, like I said, it was sort of intuitively felt hormonal for me. And it was the man who had actually delivered my babies, but he was an older gentleman and he was kind of on his way out. And he said to me that day, I'll never forget it because it was one of those pivotal turning points, we have in life. He said, I'll test your hormones, Ms. Gurley, but I'm pretty sure you're a perfectly functioning female. You're just a PMS bitch. So, I just burst into tears and I couldn't believe it. He had a young intern with him at the time, and I saw her jaw literally hit her clipboard and she flipped down. And so, but I should ultimately send him a thank you letter because that really led me to my passion and purpose. And I just decided, at that moment that I was going to have to take this into my own hands. And so
Mhm.
I just started reading everything I could. I went back to school. I studied nutrition as a foundation, and then I got into functional medicine. And
Mhm.
yeah, I've been doing that now for the past 15 years. I feel like if I were in traditional medicine, I would have, or academia, I would have a PhD by now. But and just to be clear, I'm a functional medicine practitioner. I'm not a physician. So
Yeah.
that's how I got here. Yeah.
So interesting. And like I have a hard time hearing those things. And like I think everyone probably in Canada has experienced the kind of dismissive attitude from healthcare practitioners.
Yeah.
And I don't understand why we tolerate that kind of behavior and that kind of attitude, because that certainly isn't advancing health. Even the interaction, I've had several very unpleasant interactions, and I'm like, I don't think I should be coming here feeling more stressed out and anxious.
Yeah.
And these are, again, in quotes, healthcare practitioners. So um, m- maybe let's talk about that a little bit. Like, why do you think there's that attitude in medicine that it's just so dismissive and always very all-knowing, even though it's clear they don't know all the answers?
Yeah.
Where do you
First, I
think that comes
just
from?
want to acknowledge the gaslighting.
Yeah,
That's real. And so many of my clients come to me with this story. Like it's just
wow.
dismissive, and I don't want to, paint all physicians with this sort of dark brush, but it's a systemic issue, right? Because let's be real, that academia and medicine is sponsored by big pharma. And so the problem is really systemic. They are trained, general physicians are basically trained to run labs, run blood work, and prescribe pharmaceutical medicine. And
Mhm.
so, really, I mean, specialists in their field, that's a whole different level. But general physicianry, they really, in my opinion, lost the art of practicing medicine, which is being a good clinician, developing patient relationships, right,
Yeah,
which are so important. And it's just this, it's partly because we have this socialized healthcare, right? So we're not invested, we're not like people in the United States. I have a lot of clients in the US. They have no issue sort of, paying out of pocket. It's a different kind of a system, right? And here, because we have socialized healthcare, the so-called free healthcare that we pay an inordinate amount of taxes for with super poor service, because
right.
like who's holding their fire to the feet? Who's holding them accountable, right?
Yeah,
And then we have the physicians. I have a heart for them. I feel bad for them because they're really handcuffed by the system, you know? They're only allowed to run certain labs. Like if I can share, we've done a little bit of work together, the holistic and all-encompassing, lab work that I run, right? And we just are not allowed to do that with all the money that we spend on our taxes for that
yeah,
healthcare system. We're
yeah.
not allowed to look at those labs. It's just mind-boggling to me.
Well, and let's touch on that a bit, and I'm happy to talk about my story as much as required. But you did give me two sets of tests to go that were very in depth, I guess is the right word. But I didn't get those tests done in Canada. We had to
Yeah.
send them to the United States so that a lab in the United States could go through all of this stuff. And I actually shared with the medical doctor I was seeing before, and he kind of just rolled his eyes at it. And this I'm feeling already benefits after having at least the diagnosis so we know what we're talking about. So
Yeah.
maybe let's talk about those kind of tests that what you're looking for, why, and why you think too they're not available in Canada. What's going on there?
Yeah. So the difference between functional medicine and mainstream medicine is that we are root cause medicine. So if you come to me and you say, I have a headache, I want to know why you have that headache, right? Is it hormone imbalances? Is it stress related? Are you hydrated? What's your diet like? How's your sleep? Like all of those things. So it's all encompassing, it's holistic. Whereas you go to a physician in Canada, you say, I have a headache. He'll say, here's some Advil or here's some whatever, pain medicine. And so it's it's hard to say. I mean, it's like I said, I think it's really a systemic issue in terms of how our physicians are trained and down the line, the sponsorship and all of that. But so we in functional medicine really like to look at the whole person. So we also mainstream medicine, they like to compartmentalize people, right? So,
Mhm.
you have an issue with your head, you go see a neurologist, or you have an issue with your stomach, you go see a gastroenterologist,
Yeah.
right? Whereas in the medicine that I work with, we believe and understand that the entire body is connected, right? And so we just look at you holistically. So the tests that I run are typically we're going to look at your hormones. So we do a Dutch test. It stands for dried urine test for complete hormones. And what we're looking at there is we're looking at your HPA axis, which is your hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. And this is essentially is the stress pathway, right? So So there's not a human alive today that isn't stressed out, right? So I mean, we know that stress and inflammation are basically the precursors to all chronic disease states, right? So we want to see what's going on with your cortisol, right? We want to see what's going on with your stress response. So that's one of the things that we look at there. It also looks at all of your sex hormones, right? So for women and men both, estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, DHEA, all of these steroid hormones that, when we're in a state of chronic stress, downstream from that, it affects your steroid hormone production, right? Things go in the toilet, your thyroid can quit functioning properly, your gut becomes leaky, right? So stress is just this cascade of things that happen downstream from chronic stress. So that test looks at, like I said, so your HPA axis, it looks at your sex hormones. We look at some organic acids and things like that, but it also tells us how your liver is functioning, for instance. So we see your detox pathways. We can look at methylation. We see how that's functioning. And then, like I said, we have some organic acids that we look at. So things like B12 and uh, oxidative stress, and we look at neuroinflammation. There's a bunch of different markers on that organic acids
Yeah.
piece. So we get a ton of information from this one lab, right? Which can, just if I only did that lab, which I do on every single client, I mean, it just gives us so many healing opportunities to
Yeah.
work with, right? So there's that lab, and then the
Well,
other.
let's
Okay.
just before we go there, like all of the markers you were talking about, like, how your liver is functioning, B12 and all these other wonderful things you said, it just, from a common sense perspective, you would think doctors would want to have that information. You would think that individuals would want that information. As soon as you said it, I was like, oh yeah, sign me up. I'd love to do that.
Yeah.
And I don't recall the cost is for each one, but I think it was maybe like $300 or something like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
So for $300 or so dollars, and that was including shipment to and from the United States,
Mm-hmm.
you get so much really critical and important and informative information.
Mm-hmm.
And like, it's like the doctors here, you did mention systemic, but they are at the same time, given they're not looking at these things, they're kind of working like the other part is they're handcuffed, but they're also working blindfolded if they're not getting this kind of very informative stuff.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I don't know if you want to just touch on that a little bit more, but when you started going over all of the things that it's providing, because I recall going through the test with you, but then like it's unbelievable to hear how much information a
Yeah.
$300 test provides.
From one test.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. And if you're working with a good clinician, it's like I said, that test alone, right? So I can see, for instance, on that first page on the summary, looking at your HPA axis and sort of the summary of the dials of all your hormones, it can give me a clue like, oh, she's got something going on with her thyroid because there's sluggish clearance over here, um, or she's obviously having blood sugar issues because we can see that in the cortisol response, right? I mean, there's just so many things that, and again, it's about a mindset shift because this is preventative medicine,
Yeah.
right? It's not sick care medicine, which is what our system is set up to do, unfortunately. They wait until your labs reach a level where they are allowed to prescribe you something.
Yeah.
And that's how it works, unfortunately.
Reactive medicine.
Reactive medicine. Yeah.
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 Okay, so that was the first one, and then the second test.
On the
If,
second test,
if
so
we're
yeah, it's really important because then we want to look at your gut health because, as a holistic practitioner, I understand that, 70 to 80% of your immune system lives inside your gut, right? And like I said, we understand that chronic stress, which everyone is under nowadays, leads to a leaky gut. It just causes a lot of dysbiosis in the gut. And then when you take into account our food system that we live with these days, all of these processed foods grown, sprayed with pesticides and herbicides, and one of the nastiest ones being glyphosate. So if you're basically eating any commercial grain or wheat products, I mean, your gut is being assaulted daily with glyphosate. And glyphosate is a known carcinogen. Like, how we allow this to be, they have to wear these hazmat suits to spray this shit on our food. And yet we're allowed to consume this, you
Yeah.
know? And how, like we think about, okay, well, and they always say, well, it's just a tiny little bit. Well, show me the study where all of these things take into effect,
Yeah.
all of the sources from our food, from our cosmetic products, like everything, you take all of those sources and then combine them. No one's done that study, of
Yeah.
course.
Yeah.
And we're grown adults, so we might have a little more tolerance for a level of toxins. But think about an embryo. What is it doing to that tiny little fetus?
Yeah.
They've done studies now. They look at cord blood, and it's full of all of this garbage that's
Yeah.
in our food system, right? So we know that majority of people walking around out there have a leaky gut. They have gut issues. They have food sensitivities. I mean, think about when you were a kid growing up, Eva, did you know anybody that had allergies, like severe peanut allergies or anything like that?
Yeah, you heard it once in a while, but I was just going to say when you were like, they haven't done studies. You don't almost even need studies. Just look at a photo from like 50 years ago or
Yeah.
30 years ago. You see that the health is not getting better with all of the money and technology that we have. Like it's pretty obvious to the regular human eye to see that
Yeah.
something is seriously wrong here
Yeah.
and we're not helping people. So
Mm-mm.
yeah, I don't. Yeah, I don't. And then about allergies, and then you just hear it now all the time.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm with you. I don't really think it's the human body. I think obviously it's whatever we're putting in, particularly like the gluten. And I had an amazing opportunity to travel the world for 4 years. And I would have a nice flat white coffee twice a day, 3 times a day in London when I was living there and
Mhm.
teaching yoga.
Mhm.
And I never had any gut issues. Came back to Canada. I had two flat whites and I was like in pain. And now, since I've become accustomed to it, I think my stomach just acknowledges it. But immediately I felt it. And so many people say the same thing. And yet, we're not doing anything about it. It's just amazing.
Yeah, it's the same. I have clients I work with here. They can't tolerate gluten here. They go to Italy, where the likes of Monsanto is not allowed, and no issues with the gluten or wheat products over there, right? And
Yeah.
everything's grown locally, and they just don't allow all the chemical shitstorm that we
Yeah.
have and allow in our food here. I mean, it's mind-boggling to me.
Yeah.
And as citizens, we need to start voting with our dollar, right? So I always advise my clients, yeah, like it's going to cost you a little bit more to, eat organic and stay away from this crap. But honestly, if that's what changes things, right? When we start sort of doing that, voting with our dollar and start having more demand for cleaner products, like it just kind of, yeah, like I said, it boggles my mind that, organic farmers have to pay to be certified to sell us clean food. And yet all of these other companies are just allowed to put all this garbage into our food.
Yeah.
And it becomes this cheap food. Like to me, it's just totally backwards.
And you do make a good point as well, which I think very much we have to vote with our dollars, but on the civic engagement component and getting active, that's a very important part too, because it's not like I think one story I like to give is how much sugar is in the Coca-Cola bottles or cans across the world varies.
Yeah.
So in other parts of the world, there's more or less than what Canada allows Coca-Cola to put in. So
Yeah.
there is ways to regulate this as well. And the reason I think it's important, although I do not think the government has the answers, but I think that a lot of individuals, especially at the state that we're in, there's still a lot that believe that the government has the best intentions of the people in their hearts, and they're making sure that they don't have an extremely high level of sugar in, for example, in Coca-Cola. But I think we also would, in addition to voting with our dollars, I think we also have to start asking those questions and demanding some changes on a regulatory front where the products we're having isn't full of additives, garbage, sugars. Like that needs to be regulated, just like you said. Why are we regulating the organic food, which is just food, really, without the additional stuff? maybe it should be the opposite. We should be starting to peel back all of that allowable stuff instead. And that's where we regulate, not the other way around.
Exactly, 100%. And just as you mentioned, Eva, most people are not aware of, how those food recommendations, like everybody is familiar with the Canada Food Guide, right? What they don't understand is that those recommendations are coming from big ag,
Yeah.
and lobbyists, right? It's not about your health. I mean, my God, they used to recommend you eat 8 to 10 servings of grains a day. Like, if I ate that, I would be blown up like a whale.
Yeah.
And these are the inflammatory foods, right? Like,
Yeah.
I teach my clients, just eat one ingredient food, just eat real food, and you're
Yeah.
going to be totally fine, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And and it's lovely too, like to have those things like fresh produce. And when you actually look at those
Yeah.
one ingredient things, when you go to the grocery store, that's probably maybe about 10% of what's available at the grocery store, which is shocking. So that's why I'm saying I think some of these things we need regulations. And actually that brings to mind when I was in Prague. They had obviously really big supermarkets, but then they had some more local ones near where I was living. And I walked into the local little grocery store and I looked at the produce. I'm like, where's like the kiwi and stuff? Not that I was wanting it, but I just immediately noticed there was a very limited range
Yeah.
or variety. And then obviously I clued in that this is local stuff. This is seasonal stuff. And I was like, this is
Yeah.
actually beautiful. I don't need a kiwi in August, like in the fall in Prague. It's like it's a smaller town. So
What?
that's not terrible, to have those
No.
kind of
Right.
limitations. But we've become, somebody I know called it a Costco culture. So you just expect everything at your fingertips and how much you want.
Yeah.
There it
Yeah.
is.
And in Canada, it's worse because we have to ship everything from,
Yeah.
everywhere. And then, people don't realize too, at the border, they hit it again with, irradiation to sort of make sure there's no other kind of bugs coming through the border or whatever. So it's just, the farther away your food is, the diminished quality and, available nutrients are going to be in that food. So,
Yeah.
and that's, circling back to where we started just talking about gut health. I mean, like I said, it's just this really systemic issue. And it just needs to change. It's just, and the sad part is this industry, the medical community, again, because of academia and everybody needs a double blind, placebo controlled study, that are run by big pharma. I mean, who's going to do that? Who's going to pay for that study? Like, no one, right? So it just doesn't happen. It just
Yeah.
doesn't happen. So yeah, so I look at testing the gut, and so it's basically a map of your microbiome, right? So we know now that the microbiome is so important to health. This is actually where gene expression happens. So if you have any sort of predispositions, um, those genetic expressions happen in the microbiome. And so it takes literally one round of antibiotics to increase your risk for serious depression and anxiety by 40%.
Wow.
So that's how powerful your microbiome is, right? So we have normally these good bacteria and sort of dysbiotic bacteria or sort of bad bacteria, but they live together harmoniously normally, right? And so in a healthy person, you have this robust, thriving microbiome. So not only are we getting overprescribed antibiotics for everything, but antibiotics again are in our food, right? They're in our
Yeah.
meat, they're in our dairy, they're in everything. So again, we have this assault on the microbiome, right? Just constantly depleting our good bacteria, right? So if you think about that, then you have this, on top of it, this sort of leaky gut or your mucosal barrier that sort of acts as your protector of the outside world from the inside world, right? So now you have
Yeah.
this sort of leaky and porous mucosal barrier that starts to happen from chronic stress and from this constant assault of all these chemicals. And now you have proteins leaking in through the immune system and into the bloodstream and causing what? Autoimmune conditions, right? All of these autoimmune conditions that we see now that are so prevalent, all of these responses to food and, food. food allergies and all of these things. This is why, because the gut has now become porous and leaky. Your good bacteria, which are normally there to help protect you and have your, immune system being robust, are destroyed. And mainstream medicine, like you said, I have clients all the time, they're like, I want to take this to my doctor because they're pissed off. They're like, why didn't you see this? Or why didn't you look at this? And again, they're poo-pooed, they're gaslit, the doctors roll their eyes
Yeah.
and just don't believe in it. So,
Yeah. So when you're doing these tests, what is it that you see quite commonly that, it doesn't even
yeah,
surprise you anymore?
constantly just massive amounts of dysbiosis, which is imbalances basically in the microbiome. So, like I said, you have your good bacteria and your bad bacteria. Normally, they live in harmony. And what I see is massive insufficiency in commensal bacteria and good bacteria, right? So literally just not even showing up for some people. Like their guts are destroyed. And then we're also looking at intestinal health markers there. So we're looking at your digestion, your capacity to digest fats and proteins, for instance. We're looking at something called secretory IgA, which is the main immunoglobulin that lives in your gut. And that is when we talk about, your immune system that lives in the gut, that's what we're talking about. This immunoglobulin kind of acts like a bouncer at the bar, shall we say. So it kind of hangs out on top of your mucosal barrier and it decides what gets in and what doesn't get in, right? So it's kind of your protector. And so what we see are these totally diminished secretory IgA, so just in the toilet. So these people are just sitting ducks for any kind of virus or, cancers, like all of these things, because their immune system is just in the toilet. And I see it day after day after day after day.
And do they come with similar symptoms, or it's always all over the place? Is there common, they're coming to you for a reason, obviously, too,
Yeah.
right?
So specific sort of gut symptoms are pretty common. Like people have, indigestion. There's a lot of chronic reflux, for instance. There's a lot of like loose stool or just like unhealthy stool or constipation. I mean, it can just literally run the gambit, right? So yeah, I talk a lot of shit on the daily. So, yeah. Mhm.
But and that's another thing. The first test was, as we talked about, a urine test, and then the second one was poo. And this is I in Canada, I can kind of maybe remember once in a while those. Clearly, it's generally the go-to, the default is blood. So there's certain things I suspect that you find, and information you find in the blood, in the urine, and in the poo. And so maybe let's talk about that a little bit more. Like, why is it that one of these modalities is better, or one of these products of the body is better to identify certain things than other ones?
Yeah. Well, with the stool testing, like I said, so we want to look at the health of your microbiome. The other thing that I forgot to mention is it will pick up and find dysbiotic bacteria and infections, bacterial infections, viral infections, and parasitic infections. So many people, have this constant assault on their immune system because they have these gut bugs, right? So I myself am in the middle of a parasite crisis right now because I was in Mexico and I know I had picked up something down there. And if we don't take care of it, it's just this constant assault on your immune system that is eventually going to wear you down, right? So that's that. So that's where we look for. I think it's a really good test. It's a PCR test. It's a DNA test. It's very sensitive for looking at these infections.
And
Things like,
again, about like $300,
yeah,
$400 to and from the United States. So not a crazy amount of money, but providing a ton of good information.
yeah.
Yeah.
I often tell my prospective clients that come to work for me, this is an investment in your health, in your personal health, like not just now, not just to get you well now, but into the future, right? So, I often say it's more than a pair of boots, less than a vacation,
Yeah.
to just kind of do this work and take care of yourself, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, and some boots are more expensive.
Oh, yeah. I have women who have purses that cost more than my program. So,
Yeah.
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 So,
That's something I don't understand, because I'm so much more interested in investing into this. And this
yeah.
is where I've been having this conversation a bit with people is, there's so much anxiety and or the unhappiness with how government is and why it's not better. And then I kind of think to myself, well, if we're not taking care of ourselves, how do we expect to hold others to account?
Yeah.
And I think that's still a bit controversial to say,
Mhm.
unfortunately. And I think it's quite obvious. And I think we need to talk about these things.
Yeah.
So how do you see that, and how can we start to have those conversations without, making somebody feel bad and then shut them out? I think it's just something that we should be able to have in an effort to help.
Yeah. Well, and like you, Eva, I really try to unite people more than divide people, right? I'm super passionate about that. So it's not about throwing mainstream medicine under the bus or saying all doctors are bad. It's not that at all. It's like if more and more and more patients start going to their doctors and saying, look, I paid for this out of pocket and it really helped me. Like I
Yeah.
feel better, And I want to just shout out, there are many physicians that are like, super excited that their patients are doing this work because they know that they're handcuffed and they can't do it, right? So, but again, it's sort of a societal thing where I think none of us are taught about sovereignty in any way growing up. I mean, I wasn't taught about that, about really taking personal responsibility, right? And
Right.
and so again, we live in a country with socialized healthcare where it's like, if you got a problem, take a pill, and so that's another piece of my program, is the coaching part, right? So, I mean, I spend 6 months working with my clients. We meet every couple of weeks and we have these calls, and I'm there to support them fully and wholly. Like, tell me what's going on, what's going on in your relationships? Like, what's going on? I'm here to support you, like, as a person, right? So it's again,
And,
like I said,
and just on that, and do you find that people really appreciate, and that's a component that they were really missing as well?
yeah, being seen and heard.
Wow.
Absolutely. Like I said, a lot of my clients have suffered medical abuse. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Like they're so gaslit, so not heard.
Wow.
And it's so frustrating, because we innately know that we have this intelligence, this divine wisdom in our bodies.
Right.
And symptoms, in my view, are really just that wisdom saying, hey, take a minute, something's going on here.
Yeah.
Let's see what this is about. And then when we go to our doctors, it's like, here's a pill, you
Yeah.
know, 10 minutes, you're in, you're out, and here's a pill. And you just like, what the hell was that?
Yeah.
And there's an imbalance, I think, too, in terms of the feminine and masculine, because, medicine has mostly been a masculine dominated field for a long time. Now there's tons of women in medicine now, but like when I just think even of the hormone issue in and of itself, if men
Yeah.
had to go through what women go through during this time of life, let's be real, there'd be a clinic on every corner, you
Yeah.
know? And we are just so, just so gaslit. And it's like, yeah, it's really, really quite sad. And it definitely has to change. So I'm a big proponent for that.
And do you see in Canada it changing a bit? Like, are you seeing more clients and things? And where I'm going and thinking as well as what's going on in the United States. Like, there's even now, you might be familiar with the movement "Make America Healthy Again," spearheaded, I think, a bit with Robert Kennedy Jr. and his former running mate for VP, Nicole, and forgot her last name. But her story is very interesting. I don't know if you know it, and how she's now invested, or she decided to invest a lot of money, like $100 million or something, specifically into women's health. And I just thought of that when you said it, because she just said not many women were looking into it. She's very fortunately a multi-billionaire, and she was having her own troubles, and there was not a lot of information. And so she's like, I'm just going to start investing in this because this is an important area. It's important for me. It should be important for humanity. And so that's where she started with hers. And it's incredible and beautiful to see what's going on in the United States. And I have yet to see us talking in Canada a bit more about health on like a very public
Yeah.
political platform.
Wow. Well, that's a bit of a trigger point for me, Eva, because I will tell you that I was speaking on these issues back in 2011, 2012.
Wow.
So, and my daughter was vaccine injured at 18 months, and so that's part of my drive to get into this field as well. So, she had a lot of health issues and regressed right in front of my eyes. From being a beautifully healthy, perfectly functioning baby to this like full on flapping her hands and walking around on her tiptoes and these dead eyes and that was very stressful for me. And
Right.
then I knew nothing. I mean, I was just following the schedule like we're supposed to do, blindly and blindly. But that's how I became familiar with RFK and his Children's Defense Fund. And, all I was doing was just posting about my journey, about what I had learned. And I was really just, coming from a genuine heart space, wanting to create awareness for other parents. Like, hey, did you know this could happen? Because I sure as hell didn't know.
Yep.
And
Yeah.
it's all fine and well until it happens to your kid,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
So I just wanted to create this awareness and I started to just be attacked violently,
Wow.
and it really shut me down. It shut
Yeah.
my voice down. I kind of quit talking about it because I thought I don't need this shit. Like I'm just trying to help
Yeah.
people, I don't need to be attacked in this way.
Yeah.
So it's been a long, hard road. I feel like my whole life has been kind of preparing me for this time because I really think, like, God bless RFK Jr. And if he gets, if Mr. Trump gets in and RFK can do his thing, that's what's going to change this.
Yeah.
Because hopefully, Canada tends to be 5 to 10 years behind whatever everybody else is doing,
Yeah.
unfortunately. But I'm really hopeful. I'm going to be the happiest person if Donald Trump allows RFK Jr. to get in there and clean up that shitstorm.
Yeah. Well, like, it's so sad to hear that, your daughter was injured and you knew it. I now am representing vaccine injured people in Alberta, and
God bless
the
you.
way, but the way they're being gaslit, and then the individuals that took it are being called anti-vaxxers. I'm
Yeah,
like, how do those words come out of your mouth? These people are injured. eh, Like it doesn't benefit me in any way, shape, or form to be advertising this on their
right.
behalf. It's just the common sense thing to do in, like you said, even our socialized medicine um country. But I just find that so strange. I don't even have words for it because every time I see it, it actually shocks me.
Yeah,
I don't understand why people aren't coming from compassion
right.
or curiosity. Like that's a lived experience. It's something that happened, and let's learn from it. Let's see how we can do better. Let's see how we can help this individual.
Yeah,
And like without even going into how it with the whole COVID thing, that this was, with the government and everyone telling us to do it. So you save grandma. And now the people that did that were just ignoring them. And this is okay. It's
exactly.
mind boggling to me.
Yeah. Thank you for that acknowledgement, Eva. And it's something that just gets me so upset. I think the term anti-vaxxer is a heinous term.
Yeah.
Like you said, I mean, why can't we approach this from a place of, again, coming together and just, really finding compassion for
Yeah.
someone who's had, injury to their
Yeah.
personal selves or their children. I mean, we know people who have had people die. I mean, and how do we just turn around and just spew this
Yeah.
vitriol at people in that way? Like, what has happened to us as a society that we just have become so polarized that we can't find compassion anymore
Yeah.
for the basic human condition? Like,
Yeah.
what
Well,
WTF?
especially when we're priding ourselves as the kind and inclusive country of Canada,
Whoa.
welcoming. And it's like, just look at the behavior, whether it is in line with those words, and it's not exactly. And, this is something I've been noticing too, is sometimes people disparage people over, their misunderstanding of the political system or the legal system. And then they're like, oh, you're so stupid. You don't even know what you're talking about there. Or they could approach it as, let me explain to you why that's not at all what happened or whatever. And let's have a conversation like two adults.
Yeah.
And so I see it at more because I can identify it more with the legal political stuff. But I think it's the same thing with medicine. But then I think there's a lot of money behind this too, because I don't think those conversations are happening because people are heavily invested too with the money side. Because why can't we have, if somebody just says, I'm really not interested in that right now, and here's why couldn't the other side come and say, well, this is why you should? That wasn't the reaction. It was just, you're dumb, you're an anti-vaxxer, you're going to kill everybody on the planet. And it's like, well,
Mhm.
that's a bit outrageous of a comment.
Right?
Can we break it down or can we talk about it?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I find that to me, it's incredibly sad how, like we talked about the general gaslighting, but then on with the vaccines, it just went to another level completely.
Well, and look at our illustrious leader. What was his
Yeah.
response to people who didn't want to take the vaccine? Those people,
Yeah.
like that to me was just mind-boggling. Once again, like
Yeah.
how can you segregate out a collective population that you're meant to be leading and ostracize them that way? It was just incredibly.
Well, and the thing with that too is the people that stood up
Yeah.
for those that chose not to didn't necessarily even weren't the ones that didn't get a vaccine. It was just they were saying these mandates are going too far. Like you can't
Yeah.
interfere in our lives the way that you're doing from 5,000 kilometers away. And so people were at that point. So like it just went so far. And you said it something earlier. Oh, right. I think just when your doctor said those terrible things to you. Sometimes I think we also have to appreciate that when things go so far and people kind of expose themselves, I think we have to appreciate that too, because then, like you said, that was the pivotal time. And you're like, okay, I'm going to take some accountability here and I need to learn and advocate for myself now.
Yeah.
And I think that that's something we needed a little jolt.
Mm,
I feel sometimes because I think it has
absolutely.
helped a lot of people do things likely they wouldn't have done before, investigate things they wouldn't have before. So there's light in the darkness as well that I try to
Oh,
turn
yeah.
to.
There were a lot of people's eyes opened during this time
Yeah.
period, really kind of seeing that really up front and center, like, with the censorship of, good physicians who were on the ground trying to
Yeah.
help their patients with good medicine. And they were doing that, and then they got completely shut down and censored or
Yeah.
censured. I mean, it was atrocious, and everybody saw it,
Yeah.
was
Well,
presence.
yeah, when you're just talking about it, it just like let's think about it from a logical perspective. If a doctor is talking to their patient and they're not allowed to, or they're handcuffed, does that even make any sense whatsoever? Like, why is some other entity involved in that very personal and intimate relationship of trust
Right.
and professionalism? Like, I just, when you just said it right there, it just sounded so incredibly wrong. And
Invasive.
yeah,
Invasive.
yeah,
When did my personal health records become anybody's fucking business but
yeah,
mine and my
yeah,
doctor's,
yeah,
right? Like it just, oh, that will get me going. I won't go
yeah,
down that path, but it's really something we need to take a really good look at. And like I said, I think that, like you mentioned with the Maha movement in the US, I mean, I'm going to be making some popcorn November 5th and
I,
just really open to see that happen, because I think then it will just provide fodder for Canada, hopefully, with our next election to get on board with that as well.
yeah.
Yeah.
Another group to watch is or sibling. You might know Casey and Callie Maines.
Telling
Yeah,
one.
yeah. Like
Uh-huh.
so, I'll just little bit share, and then maybe you have some highlights too. Is um the sister, I think she's Casey. Yes, Casey Maines was an ear, nose, and throat doctor,
Uh-huh.
surgeon, actually. And it just going back to what you were saying is Western medicine has compartmentalize so much. And
Yeah.
she was saying it so much. She was saying she's given quite a bit of interviews now where she did the same kind of surgery on the sinus twice. And she's like, okay, but why am I doing this? I know it helps short term, but what is the root cause? And her brother, very interestingly, was a longtime lobbyist for Coke and other major industries. And they both kind of at the same time, well, she first was like, there's something wrong here. And then he started to recognize and realize that there's a lot of problems.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you have any thoughts or just information about them that is
Mm.
good to hear and listen to.
Well, I would highly recommend that everyone listen to that interview on Joe Rogan with those two. It was brilliant. And, again, I got to say, Eva, I was a little triggered because it's like I've been trying to speak about this stuff. All
Yeah,
of the things that they said, I have been preaching from a pulpit since 2012. And it kind of pissed me off because it's like, oh, okay, now mainstream medicine is finally catching up and you have physicians saying it. Now it's true. Oh,
yeah,
and, that
yeah,
pissed me off a little
yeah,
bit.
yeah,
But I just, I'm actually really, really grateful that it's now finally becoming mainstream and they are seeing it, and meanwhile we were all being called quacks and, does your practice come with the circus tent and a table, like stuff like that. That was just,
yeah,
brutal,
yeah,
right? But they have those stats, like the stats that they throw out. And I mean, these are US based stats, but I don't think that Canada is that much different. I mean, the levels of diabetes and obesity and chronic health conditions, again, which mainstream medicine, they admitted fully on that podcast, is not equipped to manage. I mean,
yeah,
that's why is a demand for people like myself, because I can actually help those people,
yeah.
right?
Well, I want to talk a little bit about that before we close up here today. So maybe some ways, practical ways that you think, every person can kind of start with. And then what would be your recommendations for moving forward and first steps, even to when they contact you or what to look for when they're
Yeah.
trying to figure out this functional medicine
See,
sphere.
yeah. Well, first of all, I would tell everyone, really just listen to your body. And like I said, symptoms are a cry for help, essentially, right? And it's just basically your body saying, hey, pay attention to me, something's wrong. And
Mhm.
so our first instinct is to go to the doctor, get something to take away that uncomfortable feeling. Okay. And what I would encourage you to do is to turn inward and say, what is my body trying to tell me? What did I eat today? Right? And more importantly, how did that make me feel? Right. So when you come into my program, you immediately get access to a food and mood journal, for instance, right? So just to clue into that awareness, right? So what did I eat today? How did I sleep last night? Have I had any water today? Did I move my body today, or I've been sat at a desk with blue light coming at me, for 14 hours, right? Did I get to bed on time? Like all of these just sort of very basic things. If I think that's so much of what I do is just getting people to dial in those basics. We call it DRESS: diet, rest, exercise, stress reduction. And then I use targeted supplementation based on the test results that we get back, that are very specific to you. It's a customized, individualized program. So I would just tell everyone to just start thinking about those basics. Are you getting outside? Are you getting some fresh air? Are you getting, morning light, natural
Yeah.
light in your eyes first thing in the morning? Or are you immediately opening up a blue screen? And, then like 2 hours before bed, we got to be shutting down that blue light because it just, it's cranking up our cortisol and shutting down our melatonin. And so many people are on sleeping pill medications, right? And they're just not even doing the basics, right? Like having proper sleep hygiene. So all of those things are sort of part of my program, but the testing is what really takes it next level. And so if you can't get this from your physician, I would definitely recommend, seeking out a functional medicine practitioner to help you find out what is going on. Yeah.
And so where could people find you if they're looking to find Miss Shauna?
You can find me on my website at shaunagourley.com. I'm also have a Facebook page. If you just search up my name, you'll find me. And I am on Instagram at ShaunaGFDN. I also have a podcast. I'm excited. I just
Mm.
started. It's called Life Less Perfect, and it's kind of getting more into the journey of, allowing ourselves to be imperfect in this sort of world. We have all this social media where we have all these perceptions of people's, so-called perfect lives. I am not that. So it's just like you, Eva, I love trying to bring people together around their stories and their journey and creating, you know, um, cohesion instead of division. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and for me too, it's elevating the conversation. I'm tired of the insults and the mudslinging. Like, I
Yeah.
think children behave more appropriately in a playground than I see a lot of adults behaving these days, and I'm just a bit over it.
Right. And I would love to work, in community with more physicians. Like they don't have the
Yeah.
time to do this work. So don't poo-poo what I do. We should, now in a new age, like it's all about collaboration, not
Yeah.
competition. Can we
Yeah.
kind of just move away from that old model a little bit?
Love that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think it's to the benefit of people because especially too in Canada, like the healthcare system, you could hear and feel the frustration, it like overburdened all the time. And it's like, okay, well, maybe let's do a pee and poo test and let's see what that has to offer. But yeah, anyway, I really appreciate this and I thank you because you're helping guide me right now and I've already seen some amazing results, including the thickness of my hair,
Ooh.
which totally surprised me, but you're like, yeah, makes sense as soon as I told you. So it's been really helpful and I can't stress it enough how important it is just to have these basic indications. And I knew personally something was off and I'd once in a while go see a medical doctor here and same old, same old. And you immediately are like, we're going to do these tests. And we were getting some good answers and we're working through it right now. So I
Yeah.
appreciate that a lot.
I love that. And I love working with you, Ellen. I love that we've gotten to know each other a little better uh, at this time. And I just want to shout out, we're going to actually be together at a conference in November talking about all this great stuff too. So the Sovereign Minds Conference at MRU, November 16th, if people want to check that out, it's going to be an awesome event.
Yes, lots of like-minded individuals elevating the conversation in Calgary, at least,
Yes.
not Canada. Well, thank you again so much. That was excellent. We'll do a few more moments for the paid ex subscribers, and
You
I
bet.
like to get a little bit more juicy. Maybe we'll talk
Ooh.
about more hormones.
Ooh. I
Okay,
like
well, thanks again, Shauna. That was great.
You're welcome. Thank you.